Hey y'all, Grown Black Folks Talk. I want to talk a little bit today about equity, equality, and black men and women, and how maybe we can get the fussing to stop. I was at a diversity training with the staff. I'm a board member for the El Bethel Arms and Terrace community here in San Francisco. And we were at a diversity training with the staff, and it was a wonderful presentation. And there was something that I observed in that room and something that I learned just by watching. The presenter talked about the difference between equality and equity. Equality basically means everybody has equal access and receives equal access to resources and position. Everything is equal, but equity is what is fair because that means that you look at who the people are and make sure that everybody has what is just and fair for their situation. And I remembered as I was listening to this, okay, stocks, bonds, real estate, and crypto. I had just come up here earlier this week talking about crypto sweat equity. Well, what is equity? I said, well, equity is also a term for people who have actually ownership of their situation. He said, yes, because the other thing about that is when people actually have equality, it just means you have as much as everyone else. When you have equity, you have power, authority, ownership in the situation. I looked around that room at all the different people there, but I looked at it from the position of representing the ownership. See, we truly have community equity in that project going well. So we think about things differently, but goodwill is a form of equity. So also us making sure that we participate in the trainings and making sure the staff gets training. We don't personally oversee that, the management does. But making sure that certain things that we participate with them lets them have the like intellectual property. Goodwill is literally an intellectual property. It's a form of equity. So that everybody can feel like we're all on the same page. Ownership, management, employees, everyone building a kind of personal equity into what it is that the mission we're doing together. So there's a lot of meat and everyone feeling like not only do they have equal access, that they're not being discriminated against, but that they actually do have some real investment, power, maybe not authority and control, but at least that they can feel like they can have their full agency in the situation. One of the things he said is that no part of you can't leave parts of you at home. You have to be able to be safe bringing your whole person. That's a form of agency. I thought about that presentation and I thought about what's going on between black men and women. And here's the thing, for 2 days, and this is actually, I thought about this a lot. This is actually how I live. The silly fussing and fighting that goes on online is not actually a part of my lived experience that much. Because once people have a certain amount of equity in what they're doing, a lot of the fights that we go through go away because really we're caught up on equality, but once you have equity, a lot of stuff stops happening. A lot of competition stops. See, we have been trained to believe that there is scarcity. That's a lie. Scarcity is artificial. It was created by people who lived in a world full of people, not themselves, but wanted them to have everything and everyone else to have nothing. I dare you to read the Federalist Papers, number 10, written by a gentleman by the name of James Madison. Find the book called The Federalist Papers at your library. Read number 10, how he was writing to his fellows, the good gentleman of New York. But you have to understand, New York had slavery until 1827. This was 1788. He's writing his fellow slave owner class in New York, talking about we're going to build a system, talking about the Constitution that's going to have everybody so factionalized that they're not going to be able to come together and get anything from us. Because from Madison's point of view, only people, the better and best sort of people, deserve to have property, deserve to have equity. Do you understand the problem that we have had since 1788 with that mindset? And if you're black, count up 404 years from 1619 since black people were brought here to have no equity in anything they were doing, to be worked into the ground and leaving the equity in the hands of Madison's kind of people. Go ahead, and they're going to call themselves the better and best sort of people. But then again, they had believed this all the way back to when they were sitting around. Y'all heard about feudalism in high school and didn't know why it was important. Well, serfs, and is the word for servant, But when they came here, they turned in their serfs for slaves. But if you had gone back far enough and found out serfs lived on that land, but they were basically tenant farmers, perhaps you've heard of sharecropping. So you're dealing with people who, for 1,000 years, have had at least, maybe even more than that. I mean, now because the Romans sat around, the Greeks sat around and said everybody who wasn't them was a barbarian. So now we're back 2,500 years in the Greco-Roman world that Europe wants to be like so bad. That was the whole point of the Renaissance. Dealing with people that only we have a right to everything. So of course there's a scarcity mindset because we're going to hoard it all and we're going to make you fight for scraps. And when you have been trained to fight for scraps and you don't see yourself represented, you think you're getting somewhere with equality. Okay, I have equal representation. I can go to the same job. I can sit at the same lunch counter. That looks like progress. Does it actually cause you to own more things, though? We have black mayors, black senators, black governors, black congresspeople on the state and federal level. Where is the wealth of black people gone the last 60 years? I remember being 20 years younger than I am now, and black men being mad because black women were able to represent themselves buying cars and Timberlands and all that. Because again, it's fighting about equality is something that is good, but it is scarce. And here's the other thing about equality. If you don't have any equity in the society, your equality depends on whether the people who actually have all the stuff feel like doing it for you. This is why we are having to fight all this stuff about voting rights and access to the political system again, because you have enough people who are in the race of folks that controls practically everything who are not sure they feel like allowing us to have access. This is what happens when there is an equity imbalance, even in the presence of visible equality, because equity is ownership, authority, and control. Equality is just you all get to have the same amount of stuff. But when one person has all the equity, they determine how much equality there will be. So Madison's system allows there to be equality. It does from the beginning. We will own everything and you will have nothing and be happy. The Great Reset is not new. You will own nothing and be happy. That's not new. Equality of poverty for the worst sort of people, while the better and best sort can compete among themselves to divide the equity. That's been around for a long time. The Great Reset is trying to get the world back to the way it was, the way Europeans enjoyed it from all the way back to the Greco-Roman days. Equality of scarcity and poverty for some, and equality of having opportunity to move the equity around for others. You know, throw a few 100 years wars, a few civil wars, a few world wars in there because technology is advancing. But that's all it is. So here we are, as black people, arguing about ourselves among ourselves. Okay, well, black men are marrying white women and all kind of other women. Well, why can't we as black women, date out and marry other people? We should open our options. I'm not saying that we shouldn't, because it's our human heritage to be able to be with other human beings and not be held back by foolishness around race. And if you go back in ancient times, this is what happened. You married the human being that best fit what you yourself were actually trying to accomplish in life. And if you lived somewhere was important where things were kept within the tribe, then you did things within the tribe. But if you lived in parts of the world where there was mixing of people and it served you better to mix, you mix. Port cities have always been more mixed than the interior for that reason. I live in San Francisco and in California, which has that long Pacific coast. 12 to 15% of our population now is mixed race couples. And here, white people are already a minority. So that's going to increase even more. But again, that long coast, we have the Pacific coast going on. People who are inside the country wanted to get out of the country, come here. Goods and services are coming back and forth. All kind of people are coming back and forth from around the Pacific Rim. And you got to think the Pacific Rim includes, of course, China's out there, Japan, the Philippines, Australia is on the other side of the Pacific Ocean too. New Zealand. So all kind of people are coming in here. And then because we have airplanes, we have people coming in from Europe as well and from Africa. And even Africa, go across, go in the Pacific, go through the archipelagos that make up part of Indonesia, and you find yourself in the Indian Ocean. So, but with airplanes, it doesn't make any difference. We have all that mix. So in mixed areas, it often serves you to go ahead and mix because that may be what you're called to do. The beauty of diversity is it allows the genius of the human family to work together on problems that are facing the human family. How be ever Diversity serves the people that have the equity more than it serves the people who do not. Because here's the thing about Black people mixing and mingling. And for all of my divestment sisters, you need to understand this. Just like my passport bro brothers, everybody already knows who has the least equity in anything in the United States of America. And so here's what happens to you. People know who are above you. Remember, when Kanye West, a Black billionaire, got up one morning and said he was going DEFCON 3 on the Jews, he found out what that meant. You can go to the same place that any Jewish citizen of the United States can go, but there's a difference between equality and equity. And this is why that man went from being a billionaire to a millionaire in a week. See, everybody knows when you show up as a Black person, yes, you may have equal access, but do you have equity enough to survive if someone else has the equity to control your equality? No. This is why you have to be exceptionally careful, even in diverse environments, because other communities have more equity, meaning that they know that they, because they have more community support, can do a whole lot more to you than you can do to them because our community is fractured. It also means that even if they get caught, found out, and lose a job, they have more of a cushion than you have. This goes for working relationships. This goes for romantic relationships. And to my divestment sisters, please understand that every man that you will meet in the white, Asian, Latino, and Jewish communities that you ever meet in this country, or European or Native African, does not make any difference. Everybody knows what our stats are here. And even though African Americans are actually the richest Black people, if people are coming here for the American dream, and your home is the United States of America, if you haven't listened to Stephanie Perry and you haven't listened to Picky Girl Travels the World and you haven't listened to Sheeta's on the Loose and you don't know about the Exodus Collective or the Exodus Network and you're still focused on Americanism, people always know that you as an African American woman on a hypergamous journey do not want to go back. We have spent so much time talking about Black men online that every other man knows, you know what, I could probably get away with a lot with you because if I throw you back, where are you going? Because you have equality to marry whoever you will legally now. But what you do not usually come in with is sufficient community equity to protect you. What does this mean? And for those of you who are passport bros, who may be listening or may know passport bros, when you travel around the world, you are beginning to find out something very interesting. You're getting run out, getting executed in China. That's about to happen to a brother. And having to beg for a way back from home because the women drop you like a hot potato when you ain't got nothing. That was that was this week. Poor gentleman from Gary, Indiana. Nope. Women were done with him when he was out of money. He had to beg online for money to get home because you don't have the equity a white man has in the world. So when you go and exercise your options, when Black women go to exercise their options, everybody knows our stats. You know, we're gonna argue back and forth between Black men and women about who has the worst stats. In a capitalist society, none of those things matter. The main stat that happens is people know how much of everything we own and control, and that number is way too small. We have 10 million Black businesses. 70% of them are owned by Black men, most of the ones that employ, but the fastest growing Black business section is Black women who control 30% of the businesses. Here is the problem. We have all these businesses, and everybody knows that anytime a dollar comes into the Black community, it will leave in less than an hour. The most forbidding figure I saw was 20 minutes. So you got 10 million businesses, and you can't hold on to the Black dollar for an hour. You ain't got no equity in the society. You just don't. And all this arguing back and forth that we're doing is time that we could be spending in building equity. You're watching me on YouTube. Any class of investments you want to make, any kind of skills you want to learn to be able to go into diverse environments where you have equal access and earn whatever money you want to earn. You are one click away from having those opportunities to build those skills. You're 2 clicks away from Udemy, Skillshare, Teachable, Thinkific, all these different courses, Google certificates, all this stuff. Because here's the thing, I know for sure, as someone who is in the equity class of people, on multiple levels. See, I'm not just talking out of the side of my neck about this stuff. I don't have a lot of it, but I know a little bit about it. The black men that I know, I don't have a whole lot of argument with them. You know why? Because what are we doing? We have equity and we are working together to build, extend, and maintain it. We don't sit around and argue about stupid stuff because we have something much more important to do. We have to blend, extend, build, and protect the equity that we have in this community. And we are able to work with like minded people who see that we are not only ministering to our community is now diverse. So, what are we doing? Ministering from to a diverse community from an ownership position. So, we're no longer alone on this mission. We also don't spend a lot of time having racial fights with anybody else because everybody knows if you disrespect us, we will get rid of you. We will call up to your superior. We will be talking to your CEO. We will be in your office. You will be gone. We'll get you. That ain't it. We're gonna make your life difficult. You come in as a vendor acting a fool, yeah, you not gonna see us again. You gonna be sorry you ever tried that. You gonna apologize. You still ain't getting the business. We're gonna knock you off forever. Your name goes out of the vendor list. Your name shall be stricken. We don't play that. Won't play that. But at the same time, we don't argue about silly stuff. When you get to the point that you can handle the responsibility of handling equity, you will be past that point in your life. And one of the reasons that we as the black in the black community are struggling to do this is because we are really caught up on stuff that really does not matter. Again, I don't live in an environment where people are constantly arguing back and forth. Why? Because we have a mission, we have equity, we have an investment in this. We have achieved some ownership, control, and authority. We don't need to argue with anybody. We just come up and show up and be who we are. We don't have these little arguments about trying to still be validated and be seen as somebody. A cousin of mine and I were talking about this. Martin Luther King talking about we need, people need to be convinced of their own somebodyness. Once you have some equity in what it is you're doing, you don't have to worry about that anymore. A lot of what we think of as equality is a fight to be recognized as somebody. By the time you have some equity in something, you don't have to worry about that anymore. And see, the doors are wide open, but there's no telling how long they will be. I know what the demographics are on who watches my crypto journey. I have 829 subscribers. Those videos struggle to break 40. Now, does it bother me? No, it's for who it's for. But if I sit up and talk about how black women are not going to show up at a different event, I get a whole lot more. We're very invested in that question. But what I want to ask you is, does who show up in Louisville give you any more authority, control, and influence over what you're doing in your life? Well, yes, it shows that black women have agency. But do you live in Louisville? If you do, congratulations. It's good that you showed agency. I did go back and check on Colonel Jethro's page. They talk about coming back next week. Not so much. Black people as a whole, like let somebody else do it and everybody else just decline. Because again, why? Because when people don't see us making investments in things, they don't take it seriously enough to keep doing it for us. And by the way, y'all, that is actually normal, natural human behavior. See, our dependency comes, our wanting to be dependent on white people. I wanted to be dependent on anybody and everybody else. I wanted to be dependent on the Democratic Party, and then you have about 20% of, well, that number is a little bit high. Attorney Dennis Sperling thinks the number is high as 20% of black men. I've seen numbers between 12 and 20% of black men who want to be just as dependent on the Republicans and Donald Trump when he was in office as they would have been on Democrats who are not delivering anything for them. I understand that, but the point is, okay, we spend 1 point some odd trillion through the economy, and we only are able to keep the money in the economy for the money that we get only stays in here for between 20 minutes and an hour. Does it even matter whether Democrats or Republicans are in charge? No, because you are never going to have enough money to put money into to get equity in the political system that way. You are never going to be able, as Attorney Dennis Sperling said it so well, you're not going to even be able to buy a local politician. Now, Jerry Dinsboro, in the years that I was listening to him quite a long time ago, I learned a lot from him. He talked about what he does in the city where he lives. 8 black couples will get together and basically buy a local politician. They have enough between them to be able to fund a politician's run. They literally will buy a local politician, and then what you do is you talk to your local politician, and you talk about what you want to see, so that when he comes up for election again, he or she, that he gets your support. By the way, this is why Kim Ogg had to go on and accept Wayman Wesley's resignation. She's up for re-election in 2024. These folks have to get back in office every 4 to 6 years, and once people get in there, they don't want to leave in one term. So what you do if you have money is you invest in if you put a little equity down, get a little ownership, control, and authority over a local politician. But as long as we're black people in general are spending the money out of the community between 20 minutes an hour, all the politicians know we're not going to be able to do that. But we have black mayors, senators, and governors, and vice presidents, and presidents. And because we turn around and see on television, oh, there's a show with us in it. We think we've got equality, access to the public image. But we still don't have equity. And everyone else in society is looking at us. And yes, we can talk about all the reasons. There's 404 years of reasons why it was harder for us. But the problem is, if you go study the history, in the time of Booker T. Washington, we had a whole lot more equity relative to our numbers than we have now because we were focused on it. And I have a subscriber who said, black men were not supportive of black women then either. Not in the way we would have liked, but because people had no choice but to work together, they did. More often than not. It may not have been a happy situation, but the fact was, 100 years ago, yeah, we had more equity, but not necessarily for the reason many traditional black men like to think. Because if you go back as far as history as you want to go, even back to Frederick Douglass, you have black men wanting to exercise their human rights and leave their starter wives behind, from Frederick Douglass all the way down to Dr. Martin Luther King. Now, whether they were able to do it or not, because again, consider the situation, people couldn't do it. But then you go down another 20 years from Martin Luther King, and you hear no less the voice of Darth Vader sitting up here talking about having a white woman is the ultimate freedom. James Earl Jones. And come down another 20 years, Emmanuel Acho sitting up talking about how having a white woman is revenge by getting with the master's daughter. You still trying to get back at somebody who has been dust for 165 years by getting with a white woman. So, hey, you, her, 3 is correct. And that this has been going on for a very long time. Be that as it may, because we had no choice, no chance at equality. We all had to focus on equity. If we were going to have anything, we had to build institutions of our own that we could own and control. Well, in other words, we didn't have the luxury to have the stupid arguments that we have today. But given that we have the luxury to be able to be in the public discourse, I humbly recommend that you change your thinking to thinking less about, do I see my. I'll put it in the description. You need therapy and life coaching if you need to see it. It's like, vanilla ice cream, vanilla beans are brown to black, and sugar is brown. We're living in a society where people need to see everything represent themselves: white vanilla and white sugar and white paper. All of those things are actually brown. And all the chemicals and all the transitions used to get them the way they are is actually not good for us. But that's another conversation. And it's just something that we don't need to be judging that, because we're just as codependent. So you need to get to the point that you need to see your image reflected back for you to be able to do anything. We need to refocus on building what? Equity. When I talk about investment in crypto, I'm talking about getting a form of equity in the next, what we would call Web3. There's a wonderful book about this. I'll put it in the description. It just came out. It's on the bestseller list by Alan Taylor. Full disclosure, I'm on his book team because I signed up to review it and to see if it was of value. But I know that I have a YouTube channel and I have a newsletter on Hive. So if it wasn't good, I would have told you. But full disclosure, so y'all know. But this is a good book. It'll give you the history of how the internet developed and is developing toward creatives and people who can speak. I'm a little bit of both because the art, I made it. All the art you see on this channel, I made it. Are able to now use the web to be able to generate equity for themselves. And on the blockchains, you literally can build equity for you. When you go on YouTube, they have complete control over what happens to your content afterwards. So Web 2. But Web 3, getting equity in Web 3. When I talk about crypto, when I talk about Peak D, that's what I'm talking about. You actually building something that is for you in the next iteration of the internet. When we talk about stocks, bonds, real estate, stocks, bonds, real estate, what am I missing? Stocks, bonds, real estate, crypto, commodities, gold, silver, um, oil, futures in certain kinds of food, things of that nature. All these things are you getting ownership. And again, the ownership class does not spend as much time arguing about silly stuff. Black men, if they could go back and redo their institutions and could employ each other, there are enough Black businesses owned by Black men to employ every single adult Black man in the country. But the equity held by those businesses is not sufficient because, again, the Black dollar is running out the door. There are not enough Black women in business to employ every Black woman. But there are 10 million businesses. And if all Black men and all Black women had sufficient equity in what they were doing and could get to scale to hire one more person or two more people, you would have almost complete adult employment. Because you would have 10 million business owners and 20 million people employed. That's 30 million. 15 plus 18 is 33 million. So there are about between 30 and 33 adult Black people, and all of them would be employed if we had our businesses to scale. Now, since Black men want to be the leaders and they want us to let them lead, then really what we have to look at is on the day that Black men, 7 million businesses can employ 4.5 people, well, 4 3/4 to get to 33. Every adult Black person in the country has a job. And at that point, Black men would be the leaders of the community. They would have the respect that they so desperately want because they would have succeeded. But the thing is, they would have to invest so much more into building equity. The businesses that I am a part of are pulling their weight. So it's not easy to, well, I mean, my personal business, not yet. Most Black women are not at scale. I'm working on it. I'm working on it. When I do my projects, I try to find Black people. I try to find Black businesses to buy from too. That's another thing we can do to help each other out. Now, let me also say this. The divide between Black men and women about my age and younger, it is what it is. So here's what you do. If you want to help Black people build equity in their own businesses so we can begin to solve some of these problems, if Black women would make sure to buy from one Black woman a week and then bring it to every 3 days, for whatever your items are, your discretionary items, there are a lot of things we don't control because we don't have high equity in this society. But in your discretionary items, if everybody can find a way to support a Black woman, every Black woman can support a Black woman's business, and every Black man can find a Black man's business to support. And then when you get used to that and you get really brave, you might find out there are also other people across the gender from you that are providing good services as well. I'm a witness. I'm a witness to this. I probably just blew out my mic again, but I'm a witness to this being a fact. Again, I don't have to have arguments. I have harmonious relationships with Black men in business with me and in business around me. I don't have to have arguments because why? We know what we are doing. We are building what? Equity. There's enough room for all of us to build equity so we don't have to compete with each other. Also, and I need to say this in passing, this is not a conversation. The second one is not a conversation about being a capitalist consumerist. Throw all the isms out. You do live in a capitalist society, and in a capitalist society, you need equity. But even if you lived in any kind of society, with the exception of communism, everybody has a form of equity, even in a communal society, which is where we came from in West Africa. We have our things, and we choose to bring them together to build a community. This is the healthy place to which we have been trying to get back to as Black people for a very long time, until integration and until many of us have decided to be just as into the isms as everybody else. I am not talking about you dedicating your life to just the pursuit of money. For the love of money is the root of all evil, says the scripture. I'm not saying that you should do that. But I am saying you have to adjust to the realities of where you actually live. But I also want to say again, you know, listening to Stephanie Perry, Adelia Borshade, and Picky Girl Travels the World, and Rashida Dow can also tell you if you learn how to build equity in certain ways and you have certain skills that allow you to work mobile, you can leave living in a capitalist society entirely. You can leave here. You don't have to be here. You can move into a society that still has a more communal attitude. The global South has not been as spoiled as a lot of the global North that is very, very westernized. But you also don't have to leave here. I live here. I live in a very expensive city. My family has ministered to the Black community here for years. Now, has God allowed us to be the richest people in the neighborhood? No. But He's provided us what we need to do what? Dedicate our lives to our ministry. We are in a capitalist society. We are not in love with the isms. It all happens up here. Building equity does not mean that you have to start loving the world system. The system we live in is toxic. So all this, one of the reason that we're fighting for equality in a toxic system is one of the reasons that the toxicity keeps rolling back over our relationships and killing our children, killing the spirit of our children, because we're putting them in situations to either live vicariously through them or preparing them for a future that's not good for them. You know, we have to put up with certain things in the school system because we don't have the equity to get those kids out. And again, just like everywhere else in a diverse, equal society, people, you're there, you have equal access, but people know they can do anything to you because and your children, because your children don't have a community that will back them up. And let me just put this out on GP. It's worth a different video, but if you've listened this long, let me tell you something. One of the reasons that Black people need to get to build equity is because we really need to get our kids out of public school. Notice the trend on the shootings. People who don't feel they have a future are attacking the children who do, particularly since the United States is going to be minority white in 20 years. So, you know, the only way you can stop that, the elementary schools are already majority, already minority white. You wonder why all these schools, you wonder why the police didn't bother for an hour to get into that school in Uvalde? One of the reasons we need to build equity is so our children actually have a chance in life, so that they are out of the way of domestic terrorism that no one's interested in stopping, that they actually have a chance to learn 21st century skills that will allow them to make a 21st century living, and that they will have the option to go or stay. Without equity, without cash flowing options that do not depend on a system that does not ever want us to be free, you can't do any of that. Because again, everybody knows you come to work, you come to school, you come to relationships as what? Someone who has very little community equity, who is essentially a dependent trying to escape something, and they know we can do whatever you want because your alternative is to go back to the very thing you're trying to escape because y'all don't have nothing. This is what it looks like from the outside that you're trying to get to. But if you're not building personal equity from a community with no equity, you can get thrown back. It's like you need to figure out where you need to be in life and get there before you even attempt. See, equity lets you come to the table as an equal. See, this is why the question, what do you bring to the table, is not something that you should entertain from a romantic partner on a first date. But you need to know. So that you're like, oh, okay, the reason that, oh, you think you had to ask that? I brought myself to the table. You brought me here and you confused. Because you don't know, I don't deal with men who are confused back. You have to know. You have to have, for those of you who are on your hypergamy journey, you have to have enough understanding of this to be able to work with the three types of money that there are. See, you know this, most of us know this, earned income. You don't know anything about business income or equity, which grows, investing income. You need to know that you can bring to the table an understanding of it and enough done in all these areas so that if someone decides that you're no longer to be a part of their life, you don't immediately sink back down to the permanent underclass, because that's the expectation. People treat you a certain way because you're going to have a lot of representatives in the permanent underclass. All this arguing and carrying on, that's what that means. There's this young lady who is has a child by Nick Cannon. Everybody's talking about she's always going to be a member of baby mama culture. No, baby mama culture doesn't exist outside people who are going to be in the permanent underclass. No one talks about that. No one talks like that who has equity in anything. The only thing that legally exists is wife. If you're not somebody's wife, you ain't got no access to legacy or lineage or anything. Even if that person has a child with you, no, you don't have any control over that woman. Because in communities that actually have something, that term doesn't exist. So the minute that you get out of being around people that do not have equity in, they don't even have self-control, to say nothing of equity. The minute you stop deciding to go along with that and you begin to build equity in yourself, then you get access, because there is equal access. There's still equal access to be in places and spaces where all this stuff we think is so important, and even the people that promote it, are not important and do not matter at all. They can be escaped. You know, you know how much passport costs? I understand with the gentleman who only took $600 across the border to a whole different country and had to beg for money to get back. I understand for that level of passport, bro, why it's a problem. He only had 600, but y'all, a good in a bull market, a good month on Hive will pay the $150 for your passport. In a bear, it may take you a little bit more than that. But if you cashed out everything you received, if you worked hard, I mean really hard, that's 2-3 months work in a bottom of a bear market. But hey, that you get that through your what? Crypto sweat equity. Equity. That's what we've been talking about. People who do not build equity do not have the options that other people have. If you have $600 spent on a trip, your passport costs a quarter of that. But we're only talking about $150, and I think that's even with the rush shipping and all that. Build equity. Equity is what gives you options. Having having capital that belongs to you is what gives you options. You getting $100,000 a year job that someone owns and controls, who knows that they can do anything to you, and because you're scared of losing that $100,000 a year job, that's equality. That's not equity. They have to fairly give you the job, but they know that they can do certain things to you that you can't do anything about because you don't have the equity in your community to back it up. And by the way, y'all, communities that have high equity do not have police shooting down members of the community in the street like that. That's not what happens. Communities that have low equity are sitting ducks. Get the picture? Again, we as black men and women are spending time arguing about silly stuff when we really need to be looking at, how do we get the skills? How do we get the investments? How do we get the knowledge to be able to do things? I have a couple books I need to talk to y'all about. There's another one coming talking about, whatever your family looks like, how to build business together. That's coming. It's not there yet, but it's coming. I'll be talking about it. so that you can begin to move forward in doing the things that it takes to be able to move freely in a capitalist society. I didn't say become a capitalist, but to be able to move freely, to not always be worried about being dependent on someone else. All this fussing and fighting that we are doing is distracting us. So whether you're a black woman, see, okay, and let me say this. Building equity as a black woman means that if things do not work out in the romantic department, you and any children you have can make it. Having your own when you come in and learning the legal parts to make sure you have your own when you leave, depending on what state you live in. But first, you have to know here, you have to have built something and then you have to protect it. So no matter who comes into your life and who goes, you're going to be okay. That's important. Black men also should build this up and build it and protect it because, anybody can choose the wrong person. But once we have those things, when you have equity, then you can move as equals and not be as afraid. Weak people want weaker people as partners to dominate them and to feel like they are investing in their somebodyness. Strong people who are healed and mature people want to be with strong, healed, and mature people. I had 2 excellent days in a row being with black men and women and others who actually are strong, mature people on a strong mission. Working on what? Equity. I want each of you to have that experience. I did this video not to chew you out, but to let you know equity is possible. It can be built for yourself, and then you work with people who want to give you, to want to work with you to build more. Because again, now we're beginning to talk about not people who need to be given stuff, but by people who bring things to build together. We give to each other. We have equity to blend and extend and protect together. It's a very different way of living. I want all of you to change your focus in 2023 and get there. All right. Y'all have a good day now. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.